I'll be using my basic body sloper. You could use yours or you could draft a fresh one. My shoulder measurement is 5 inches, 2.5 inches on both sides. My neck is 3 inches wide, 3 inches long. Shoulder to chest line is 6.5 inches. Chest line center front to armhole is 7 inches. That's my bust level, center front, that intake, waistline, side seam, and armhole. So I just did a run through of my basic body sloper. I basically just transferred my body sloper. You could do the same, or you could draft yours afresh if you don't already have one. So the next thing I'm doing now is to transfer my markings onto the other side of the paper using my tracing wheel. I will upload a video on how to draft a basic body sloper much later. So I kept transferring all my markings to the other side of the paper, as you can see me doing. Please take your time while doing this so you don't make any mistakes. So because it's a wrap dress, we need a full front to draft the wrap bodice. So that's why I had to transfer my markings to the other side of the paper so I can get the full front. I'm done tracing all the markings now and I've opened up my paper. The next thing I'll do now is to pencil in all the markings, all the tracing I did. I'll pencil them all in. Here's my full bodice after transferring all the traced marks. What I'm doing now is going up from my waist on the side seam by 1 inch on both sides. After that, I positioned my curve rule, targeting my shoulder line and that 1 inch mark I just made on my waistline. I connected both lines together with a slight curve. The next thing I need to do now is to measure down 3 inches from my bust level, my bust point, and square a line across like so. That is my under bust level. Next, I measured 0.75 on both sides of my under bust dart legs to tighten the under bust. Then I also measured half inch on both dart legs of the waist, and then I connected it to the under bust using my straight rule. And then I connected that point to my bust level as demonstrated. After that, I picked up my straight ruler and connected from that under bust point to my shoulder line. Shoulder line closest to the neck. Then I repositioned my curve rule and blend my armhole into my chest line as demonstrated. After that, I picked up my armhole curve and blend in my bust point to get rid of sharp points. You can see me blending in those sharp edges. So the next thing I did was measure from that point to my waistline to get the length, and then I measured the other side as well to get the length. Then I discovered that this second side is shortened half inch, so I added half inch to it to make sure they are both equal. After marking out the half inch, I used my curve ruler to blend it in into that line, and then I crossed out the areas that would later be cut away. What I did next was to connect my shoulder line to my under bust, that's leg, to my under bust. I connected it to my under bust like so. Then I connected from my under bust to my waistline as well, just like we did on the other part. So next I measured from that point to my waistline and I noted down the measurements. And now I am adding my seam allowance. I added a 1-inch allowance to the side, and then I came down by half inch on my armhole area and blend it in with a slight curve, as you can see. Then I extended the line to the 1-inch seam allowance, and I also did the same thing on this other side, 1-inch seam allowance. And now it is time to cut and cut. So on this part I discovered that I did not pencil in the 0.75, that intake for the under bust. I'll pencil it in now and then I'll remark that area. From my under bust point, I went up by 2 inches, and then I blend in the line like you just saw me did. Then I measured it with the other part to make sure they are equal before cutting out. For the back, get a paper with 9 inches length and 7.5 inches width. On the waistline, measure 1.5 inches away from the side seam and place a mark. On the center back, measure 2.5 inches away from the edge and make a mark. Then use your curve rule to curve it into the side seam as demonstrated. After that, go back to your waist and measure 1 inches away from the center back on the waistline. Then draw a straight line from the top part of your side seam to your waistline, as you can see. Do the same thing to your center back. Then connect the two marks on your waistline together using a slight curve. Annotate SS on the side seam to avoid mix up. Also, make sure you indicate something that will let you know you are supposed to add side seam allowance, and we won't be needing any zipper allowance because we're using loops. For the lower part of this dress, get a paper measuring 24 inches wide and 40 inches long. I came down by 1 inch from the edge of the paper, and that is my waistline. Then from the waistline I came down by 8 inches, and that is my hip line. Then I also marked down my waist to knee measurements, and I made a line across. After that, I went back to my waist and I placed down my waist measurement plus an inch for that intake. Once I'm done with that, I also placed down my hip measurements, and then I drew a line from my waist down to my hip, as you can see. Then from my hip to my knee, I placed down my knee measurement, and I drew a line from my hip down to my knee, like so. After that, I took my L square and I drew a line from my knee level to the hem of the dress, and then I measured the center front of my skirt from my knee to the hem. Then I placed the same measurement on the side just to make sure both sides are equal, and then I curved it into the hem like so. Next, I placed my bust fan measurement on my waist and hip, and then I connected both lines. From my waist, I came down on that line by 3 inches, and I connected my dart legs to that point. My dart intake is ½ inch on both sides. After that, I used my tracing wheel to transfer all my markings to the other side of the paper because this skirt is going to be overlapping each other. So I need the full front pattern to draft the two pieces that will be overlapping each other at the front. So I'm done transferring all my markings. Yeah, as you can see. So sorry guys, there was an error in recording when I did this part, so I'll just go over it for you guys to understand. I placed my 40 inches ruler on my bust pan and I drew down a straight line. After that, I measured 8 inches from my side seam and I placed my curve rule on it like so. That was what gave me that nice curve, and I drew out the curve like that to that point. You get it? So after that, I divided my waist to hip into 8. My waist to hip is 8 inches, so that's 1 inches all through. Then on the other side, I did 2 inches into 8 as well. Then I connected the 1 inch to the 8. Sorry guys. Then I connected the 1 inch to the 2 inches, as you can see. Yeah, so that I got that with a slight curve. Okay. So next, I'll be using this front piece to draft my back piece before slashing into those lines we just made. So here is my back piece. I extended my center back by 2 inches, as you can see. Then I drew out my knee length, knee level. I went in by ½ inches. On my waist level, I also went in by ½ inches. And on my hip level, I came out by 1 inch, and I connected the ½ inch on my waist to my hip. then the half on my knee line to my hip as well. And for my knee line, I drew a straight line down to my hem, and then I decided to do, do this thing I'm doing right now. You can just leave yours as straight, okay? Yeah, so I added ½ inch for zipper allowance at the center back. I connected it back to the hem. After that, I then cut out my back piece. And we're done with the back. Yep. So now back to the front. I placed it on another paper. Yeah, I told you the front has two pieces that will be overlapping each other. So using my tracing wheel and my 40 inches ruler, I traced that line, and then I used my curve rule to trace that part as well onto the paper, and I traced my side seam, my waist as well onto the paper, and then I pencil in all the traced marks. So yeah, this is what we have for the second front piece. I added my sewing allowance, and then I curved in all my curves, made them nice and good. At the side seam I added 1 inch sewing allowance, then as you can see the rest sewing allowances are ½ inch, and that is the other front piece. And yeah, we're done, so I'll cut it off. Then we'll go back to slashing and spreading the other front piece. So I'm taping in my darts right now. I'll tape in my darts intakes before slashing. I slashed through all the marked lines, but not to the end. I sandwiched a paper underneath it, and I taped down my pattern nice and flat. Now I am curving in and blending in all my curves on the waist and on the side seam. Now I am pleating my skirt, making the space in between these lines are 2 inches, 2 inches apart. So I am pleating in those 2 inches. Please watch closely and be careful. Don't rush while doing this part. Do it gently. Fold it, pleat it gently, calmly. Be as calm as possible. After I finished pleating, I used my curve rule to blend in the curves on my waist to my hip. Then I used my tracing wheel to transfer the markings, and then now I am penciling in all the marks I transferred with my tracing wheel. After transferring all the marks, I cut it off like so. Before cutting off this part, I added a ½ inch allowance to it. And here is the two front piece looking beautiful already. So I've gone ahead to place my patterns on the fabric. These are all the front patterns, nicely laid and secured. This one I'm currently cutting will be overlaid by the other one, will be overlapped by the other one. I added 1 inch allowance. As you can see, I'm currently adding an inch allowance to this one as well. Remember, I pleated this part then when I was drafting before I cut off the pattern, so I had to press it with an iron. That's why you see it laying nice and flat. So you should do the same to yours. Adding an inch to both sides, to the side seams. After that, I cut off the fabric. So for the upper part of the dress, I added 1 inch to the side seams, then every other part ½ inch apart from the waist. The waist already has a joining allowance, so I didn't add any allowance. So I went ahead to position the back piece as well. You can see the back pieces, the back patterns nicely laid as well. I'm adding my side seam allowance to the back skirt, to the back piece. So once I'm done, I cut it off, and then I do the same thing to the upper part of the back piece, and that is it.